Malachi chapter 1, verses 1 through 2 and 6. A prophecy. The word of the Lord to Israel through Malachi. I have loved you, says the Lord. But you ask, how have you loved us? As a son honors his father and a slave his master. If I am a father, where is the honor due me? If I am a master, where is the respect due me? Says the Lord Almighty. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. Well, hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Walt. I'm one of the pastors here at Hope. It is good to be with you. I'm curious, how many of you have ever had a how it started, how it's going moment? I love these little points of contrast because typically they're experienced in this kind of unexpected way, right? Sometimes it's for the best. You know, who doesn't love a feel-good movie ending or against the odds sports story? But the ones that I enjoy probably a little more than I should are when things go a little sideways, right? The plot twist we didn't see coming, when the rug gets pulled out from under someone. And I laugh because I know that pain. Okay, let me tell you about my wedding day. Here's Jen and I, circa June 2007. And I know what you're thinking. This is a hair joke, right? Like how it started, how it's going. Yes, I know I had like flowing locks back then. I don't now. Different joke for a different day. When Jen and I got married, she was in grad school. I was working for a campus ministry, and so we were keeping our budget pretty frugal. We didn't hire a coordinator. We planned out everything ourselves, and it was awesome. Everything came together. Beautiful ceremony. All of our friends and family in one place. It was a party, dancing, celebrating. It was going great. How it started, awesome. But then when the evening started to wind down, we realized like we didn't really plan out the end. We didn't have an exit strategy. And as it turned out, we both had different ideas about how things were going to go for like our last dance and our exit. And what had started out amazing was beginning to turn into a bit of a fight on our wedding day, on the dance floor. And I say some stupid things. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, Jen's crying. Like, I got to figure this out. And we get on the same page and, you know, it all kind of goes according to plan-ish, right? But we're driving back to the hotel. Her cousin is taking us back. And I'm in the back seat. And I'm looking at her. I'm going, I am so sorry. Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to be spending my wedding night on the couch. Like, that is not great, right? That is a how it started, how it's going moment. You know, everything worked out. It was a little dicey there for a second. But I'm curious, for you, have you ever had a how it started, how it's going kind of moment? Maybe it's one of those look back on it and laugh kind of things. Maybe it didn't resolve particularly well. Or maybe you're in a how it's going moment and it's not going great. Maybe you recently moved to New York, right? And when you got here, it was all empire state of mind, greatest city in the world, right? But now the shine has worn off. And like, you're just kind of getting tired of getting pushed on the subway, right? Like the hustle and grind of the city is relentless and tiring. You feel like every time you step out of your door, $200 just goes flying out of your pocket. Or maybe you got your dream job and you showed up, you're ready to rock and roll, but then you realize your boss is kind of terrible, right? The hours and demands are insane, right? And you don't really like it as much as you thought you should. Or maybe it's the opposite. You thought you had your dream career all lined up, but it just didn't pan out, right? And now you are killing yourself to make ends meet. Your side hustles, half side hustles, right? You are grinding. Maybe there's a relationship in your life that's on the struggle end of how it's going. You know, you were so excited to get a significant other, get married, have kids, and then you did, and it was great. But after a time, you realize, like, whew, like people are hard. Relationships are hard. Kids are super hard, right? And those rose-colored glasses aren't feeling so rosy right now. And maybe this has been a part of your spiritual experience. Maybe there have been a moment or even moments when God just kind of like snapped into focus, right? You had this experience of God's love and God's goodness and God's power that just felt crystal clear and tangible. God's presence was enveloping. God's power was electrifying. You had this amazing experience of healing or of forgiveness or of hope, and it changed your life. And maybe meant you began following Jesus in a new way, perhaps for the first time, perhaps for the 100th time, but you were riding this high of this encounter with God And even if you aren't a Christian, I wonder if there have been moments of spiritual movement in your life that have stirred something in you, that have made you feel like, man, there might be something more out there. And you're curious. You're trying to figure out what is going on there. And these moments are so significant. There's about 200 members of our Hope community who are on a bus coming back from our fall retreat that we were at this past weekend. And we're hoping that that time away from the noise of the city provided exactly that, a new kind of encounter with God, because those moments are so precious. They're so important. And yet, as many of us can probably attest to, they can also be incredibly fleeting. We have these amazing moments, but then it's back to real life. Back to our career, family needs, tricky relationships, back to some of those familiar pulls, those familiar compulsions, gossip, social media outrage, excessive partying or hooking up. And before long, that encounter with God that began to feel so fresh now begins to feel faded and distant. I was just reflecting on this dynamic in my own life recently. About a month or so ago, I got to attend this amazing conference of pastors and leaders from around the world as we were reflecting on this movement of God that we were seeing happen in major urban centers like New York and London, and it was just mind-blowing. And I came back from that time just like hungry for more of God, excited to pray, like ready just to get in it and see what God would do. But I couldn't help but think of myself like, oh, these past 2 weeks, things have felt a little flat. My prayers have felt a little more distracted. I've kind of lost a little bit of that hunger. I was just like, okay, here's all these needs that I need to meet. Here's these plans I need to make, right? That shine has kind of worn off a little bit. Real life can do that. And of course, this kind of how it started, how it's going dynamic is nothing new, right? It's something that God's people have been struggling with from the very beginning. And it's the dynamic that we see happening right at the beginning of this book of Malachi, which we're going to be reflecting on today. We're coming down the home stretch of a fall sermon series called Major Truths from Minor Prophets. And if you're just joining us, the Minor Prophets are a series of 12 books in the Old Testament. And while they are minor in length, they are major in impact. And it has been powerful to sit with their words as a community for the past few weeks. Most of the prophets that we've been looking at have been warning God's people that because of their persistent unfaithfulness and injustice, God was going to remove his protection from them and allow the Babylonians to swoop in, lay siege to Jerusalem, and drag them away in exile, right? So it's been all this kind of buildup for this big moment that's going to happen. And it happened, right? The Babylonians came in, they wiped them out, they dragged them off to Babylon for a period of 70 years, right? Where every day their identity was under threat, their culture was under threat. But 70 years came and went, and then God moved again, and the king released them. And they went back to Jerusalem to rebuild the city, rebuild the temple, rebuild their identity as the people of God. And in the book of Ezra, the whole city is reading the scriptures, worshiping God, promising to be faithful once more. Wow. But what if I told you that it didn't last? What if I told you that the spiritual high would eventually give way to all of those old patterns of unfaithfulness, corruption, injustice? And this is the context of Malachi's message. 100 years after God's people came back to Jerusalem, they were right back where they had been. You know, it seemed like it was going to be this whole new way of living and relating to God, but then these old ways just crept right back in. How it started, how it's going. And so through the prophet Malachi, the final book of the Old Testament, God has come to confront his people one more time. And the book has a really fascinating structure. It's a series of charges that God is bringing against God's people and that they in turn respond to. And I want to break it down for us because I think there are significant takeaways in each of these little disputes. The first section sets the tone for the whole book. God says, I have loved you, but the people respond, how have you loved us? Right? The first time I read this as I was preparing for the sermon, I was like, oh my gosh, it sounds like my kids. Like, what have you done for me lately? Right? The entire theme of this sermon series and a theme that undergirds the entire story of the Bible is that God loves people who constantly forget God's love, constantly reject God's love, right? And even in this short snippet of history, we have seen God's love in crystal clear ways as God has tried to call his people away from these unhealthy patterns of injustice and infidelity. We've seen him delay as punishment for their wrongdoing for as long as possible. And then, even after this time in exile, God again brings them back, blesses them, promises them a life of abundance and a life of blessing with God. And yet, they still ask, how have you loved us? And I think this underscores one of the very first things to go when we begin sliding back into the old ways of living, is that we lose our sense of gratitude. We forget the ways that God has loved us. How many of us can point to a time where God came through, where we were praying this massive prayer and God answered it, and like, wow, it was amazing for a minute. But then we're saying, oh, hey, what have you done for me lately? How have you loved me? In the second section, God says, a son honors his father and a slave his master. If I am a father, where is the honor due me? If I am a master, where is the respect due me? It is you priests who show contempt for my name, but you asked, how have we shown contempt for your name? Again, very childish. God says, you have not honored me. And they're like, whoa, what are you talking about? And so God responds, I will show you how. God says, by offering defiled food on my altar. When you offer blind animals for sacrifice, is that not wrong? And when you sacrifice lame or diseased animals, is that not wrong? Baked into their very identity as God's people was the fact that God was the one who is ultimately going to provide for all of their needs. So they could trust God every single day of their lives because God was going to be one who was going to come through with land, with crops, with food, with provision, even to abundance. And as part of that relationship, the people were to honor God by giving God back the best of what they had. They would offer the best of their crops and their livestock on the altar so that as it was burned up as an offering, the smoke would go up to God as God's portion, so to speak. Right? If you had like a family member or a close friend who did something amazing to you, right? Maybe they paid for your college education. Maybe they gave you a down payment on your house. Maybe they donated a kidney because you were in need. I don't know, something extravagant. If they said, hey, I'm coming over for dinner, you probably wouldn't say, all right, I think I got some nuggets I can throw in the oven, right? Like you would honor them with the meal that they deserved because they were special. But instead of giving God their best, the people gave them not even like mid-tier stuff. They gave them their worst, like way worse than nuggets. Disease and lame animals that weren't any use to them. So they just tossed them to God as a way of checking off the box. God says, try offering them to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you? Right? You wouldn't even give these to a local magistrate. So what are you doing giving these to the God of the universe? And it should make us ask, are we giving God our best? Or are we giving God our leftovers, our scraps, spare change, spare time? Nothing that actually costs us, nothing that requires real effort. And when it comes to our best time and energy, our best creativity, our best passion, our best attention, our best investment, we give those to other pursuits. Our careers could easily be the recipient of this. It could also be our own image, our own brand, people whose opinions matter to us, that we're trying to impress. But either way, there's a lack of honor being given to God. As we might be tempted to phone in our spiritual lives with half-hearted and distracted prayers, sporadic attendance to Sunday worship, to small group gatherings, or just giving a few bucks towards those in need. God is worthy of our best. But how often do we give him the honor that he's due? The third charge has to do with intermarriage. God says, Judah has been unfaithful. A detestable thing has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. Judah has desecrated the sanctuary the Lord loves by marrying women who worship a foreign god. Now, we talked a lot about this whole concept of unfaithfulness towards God in our sermon last week when we looked at the book Hosea. And if you haven't read it, check it out on our sermon series website. But sad to say, this pattern of unfaithfulness has continued well beyond the days of Hosea. But Malachi adds this really interesting wrinkle to the whole thing. It says, God goes on to say, another thing you do. You flood the Lord's altar with tears. You weep and wail because he no longer looks with favor on your offerings or accepts them with pleasure from your hands. You ask, why? It is because the Lord is the witness between you and the wife of your youth. You have been unfaithful to her, though she is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant. God is drawing a very clean line between unfaithfulness to God and unfaithfulness to others. As this community has been adopting the religious practices of other nations, there has also been this wave of men divorcing their wives for no good reason. Perhaps this is to marry women from these other nations, perhaps out of their own selfishness and immaturity, as this communal value of fidelity and faithfulness had been eroded, right? And then you have these guys who walked out on their wives, all upset, because when they do turn to God, he doesn't answer their prayers. And God is basically like, don't even come at me with that nonsense, right? You can't live one way and then expect something else. And yet, how often do we do that? How often do we compartmentalize our relationship with God and our relationship with other people like the two don't have any kind of connection, like they don't intermingle at all? Maybe we're dialed in with our spiritual disciplines, but we treat people poorly. We're sarcastic, demeaning, unreliable. We just continue to stoke divisions, but we expect God to deliver because we're still, quote, good Christians. All right? Or it could be the opposite. We've begun disengaging with God, but not expecting it to have any actual impact on our relationships with others. And I just wonder, how long is it going to be before we realize that our own wells of love and kindness and patience are actually a lot shallower than we would have hoped to think? In both instances, there's a lack of integrity, a lack of a sense of wholeness and consistency that God is wanting to draw their attention to. With this fourth dispute, you can just sense God's exasperation. Malachi 2:17 reads, "You have wearied the Lord with your words." How have we wearied him, you ask? By saying all who do evil are good in the eyes of the Lord, and he is pleased with them. Or, where is the God of justice? Why are these prayers wearisome? It's because the people that are praying them are the ones who are perpetrating the acts of injustice that they're actually praying against, right? They're the problem. There's why things are such a mess and so broken in their society, and yet they are unwilling to take any kind of responsibility for their part in it. Of the 4 people and 1 dog that live in my apartment, my small Brooklyn apartment, I am the quietest. And there will be moments where everybody else is just blowing up. They're yelling, they're barking, they're screaming, they're fighting, right? And I'm just finding myself just like, so annoyed. Like, especially if there's some kind of like fight or conflict happening, I just want to be like, what's the matter with you people? Can't you just be nice to each other? And sometimes, that is what I say. I do say those things. I'm not proud of it. But I've learned the hard way that just because I'm quiet doesn't mean I'm innocent. And more often than not, things get whipped into a frenzy because I'm the one who's disengaged or distracted, right? Things might be different if I had stepped in with the kids more, or if I tried to de-escalate things with some encouragement or humor, or if I just really listened to what was going on instead of dismissing it. Perhaps if we're honest, we're quick to rant against our family, or our roommates, or our colleagues, or our church, when really, with a little more humility, we would see that we have plenty of our own contributions to what's going on. As Taylor said, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. In the fifth dispute, and we're nearing the end here, stay with me. God continues to say clearly, return to me and I will return to you. But you ask, how are we to return? And God says, will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? God says, in these tithes and offerings, right? The people say they want more from God, but they fail to show up. They want more, they want to experience more of God's blessings, but they are unwilling to experience more of God's heart. They want God to be generous towards them, and yet they are unwilling to be generous towards God. The issue at stake here is clearly a financial one. Despite God's provision and God's command to be generous, they are withholding the tithe, 10% of their income. Right? I imagine that many, if not all of us, face a similar struggle around being generous with giving our money towards God's purposes. But we can also broaden it to other areas of our lives. How many of us would say that we want more from God, and yet we aren't willing to actually put ourselves in a position to receive more? We want more of God's blessing, but we hold on to our finances because we think that's actually the smarter play. We want real relationships. We want to be free of loneliness, but we don't show up to community spaces. We don't do the hard work of being a good friend. We say we want deeper spiritual life to experience more hope, more peace, but we neglect prayer, the scriptures, worship. We say we want our children to walk with Jesus, but we don't do the hard work of modeling a life of faith for them. God is highlighting a lack of commitment on the part of God's people, and it should make us ask hard questions of ourselves as well. Over the course of Malachi, God has exposed their lack of gratitude, honor, integrity, humility, and commitment. How it started, how it's going. And all of this culminates in God's promise to bring a day of judgment to his people. God says, surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble, and the day that is coming will set them on fire. Not a root or a branch will be left to them. But for you who revere my name, the Sun of Righteousness will rise like healing in its rays, and you will go out and frolic like well-fed calves. A day of judgment against all of our lack, all of our failings and shortcomings. How should we feel about this? Should we feel fearful? Hopeful? Well, it all depends. You know, I love this time of year because of the holidays and the festivities. Like, it's great. But what always bums me out is when it's like 4 o'clock and the sun is going down. It's just a bummer, right? Like, I love being outside. I love enjoying the sun. Usually I'm kind of covered up because I'm bald and white and I burn very easily. But hey, I like it, right? I enjoy it. I want to be outside. I want to just give me a warm, sunny day. Perfect. That's been true as long as I can remember, except for one day. When I was in high school, I had a nasty case of pink eye. Gross. And I remember it being a beautiful spring day, warm, bright, glorious, and I didn't want anything to do with it because the sun was just too painful. It just hurt. Anytime I saw it, I was like, it's just like sharp shooting pain in my eye, right? It was uncomfortable. It was irritating. I just made it crank. I just hated it. And I couldn't even stay in my kitchen or living room because of the light coming through the windows. That still was just incredibly painful. And so I spent the whole day down in the basement in the dark, like Gollum or something like that. Like, I was miserable. Was it the sun's fault? No. Of course not. The sun was the sun. Nothing had changed with that. The problem was with me. It was my eye that was diseased. I was sick. It was sick in a way that made the sun's warmth and light painful instead of enjoyable. And this is the dynamic that God is speaking to. The sun of righteousness will rise with healing in its rays. For some, this will be an amazing gift. It is going to be the sunrise that they have been praying for and yearning for their entire life. A sun that is going to come to bring healing and justice and hope that they have been wanting, yearning for, crying out for. That sun is coming. But God says that this same sun will cause burning and destruction for those who are arrogant and evildoers. The sun isn't different. The difference is how the sun is received. And this is how the book ends. God says, I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come. It is this major cliffhanger that is going to be hanging out there for 400 some years as God's people wait and watch for God to come. See, one of the main points of the Old Testament is that no matter how many times things start over, no matter how many new beginnings, how many new kings, how many new eras begin, people will always fall back into their ways of sin and selfishness. Because sin has fundamentally corrupted us to the point where we are like a diseased eye, unable to enjoy the sun and all of its gifts. And though things might have started off well, they are ultimately false dawns, right? So we don't need another beginning. What we need is another eye, another heart, another way of relating to God. We need God to come and fix us himself. And this is what Malachi points out and points to, right? That God is coming. God is bringing healing, or God can let us stay trapped in sickness and in death, if that is what we want. And when God comes in Jesus, this is this amazing thing that we see happening around him. The day of the Lord comes, Jesus has arrived. Some people double down on their sickness. Like the people in Malachi, they say things like, what have you done for us lately? How have we dishonored you? How have we wearied you? They harden themselves towards God, and they refuse to take responsibility for their part in the brokenness of God's world. But then there is this mass of people that rush to Jesus, that swarm him and surround him and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my lack of gratitude, my lack of honor, my lack of integrity, my lack of humility, my lack of commitment. Will you heal me? And to those people, Jesus gives a resounding yes. Yes. He is the Son of righteousness. He is the one with healing in his rays. He is the one who has come to bring a new eye, a new heart, a new way of relating to God in ways that will last, by sending his very Spirit into us to make us new. Malachi and the rest of the minor prophets are filled with warnings because God is trying to do precisely that. Warn people, right, about a life that is leading to death so that they will turn and find life and healing with God. God desires that all will know his saving and healing power. That is crystal clear. And so perhaps if you have been exploring Christianity, you're considering the claims of Jesus, and you're hearing these words and you're thinking like, shoot, like I have some things in common with these people that Malachi is speaking to. Then perhaps this is the warning that God is giving to you. This is the invitation that God is giving to you to stop doubling down on your sickness, to stop trying to just find that new thing that is going to fix your problems, but instead to receive the hope and the healing that comes only from him. God wants to heal you so that you will become all that you have been created to be. And all you have to do is say, I'm sorry. I want to be healed. And then let God do the work that God so desperately wants to do. For those of us who have experienced the healing power of Jesus, then the call of Malachi is to remember who we are and who God is, to stop living like we haven't been healed, right? To kind of like stop settling for life in the basement, to come out of the darkness, to come into the light, to ask God to remind us of God's healing work, and to work out that healing in our lives so that we would turn away from those places where we just keep sliding into that area of lack. Many years after Malachi, the Apostle Paul would write, "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus." God is going to work out his healing in us all the way through and all the way to the end. Right? This is kind of the ultimate, like how it started, how it's going. Like we know where it's going. That God is not done with us. That God has continued to give us new eyes, new hearts, new ways of living, new ways of being in this world. Because he wants nothing less than that for us. And he is not going to settle until his love fully transforms us, heals us, and empowers us to be people of light and blessing in our world and beyond.